All right, guys, so welcome to this little behind-the-scenes tutorial, full Nerdfest rundown of my song Beautiful Face on the new EP. Feel free to turn this off if you do not like nerdy stuff, because we're going to get nerdy and it's probably not going to be super interesting to some people, but hopefully it'll be interesting to others. I don't really care either way. So this song was a kind of cool thing that I stumbled on that I wanted to share with you guys. Basically started out like any other song that I do, which is with the drums. Shocking. So I programmed a groove on the analog rhythm, which is a Electron drum box, analog drum machine, really cool. I'll show a photo of it here somewhere. And that sounds like this. So basically what that is you have multi-track of the drum groove, which is like kick, couple snares, hats. And then when you get to this effects track, that's where it kind of gets interesting. Basically what you can do on the analog rhythm is you can map a bunch of effects parameters to the pads. So you can kind of perform all of the effects throughout the arrangement. So that's what I've done on this track here. And basically that's what I'll do is I'll program a 2 or 4 bar pattern and just perform the effects in as I'm recording this whole thing down. So the effects will change throughout. So you get cool stuff like that. And when you have it layered up with everything, gives you a lot of interest here. So you get the idea. So it's a pretty typical technique that I'll do. So I'll run down the whole thing. I'll chop up the bits that I like. So that's the drums. That's how that started. And then we move on here to this little bass part. I programmed a little bass part on this Arturia Oberheim SEM plugin. Obviously, I have a lot of hardware. I love modular stuff. I love hardware in general, but this plugin sounds great, and who gives a shit whether it's a plugin? It doesn't matter how you get there as long as you get there. Anyway, sounds great. And that one sounds like this. Cool. Not terribly exciting, but when you pair those two together, you know, it's a cool vibe. So then what I did was printed this whole thing. So the bass part, this whole bass part, and this entire drum performance, printed that whole thing down into one file, imported that into Logic for further processing. So let's pop over to Logic and I'll show you what I did there. Cool. Okay, guys, here we are over in Logic now. So this is the track that I printed down, which was those drums and the synth bass, the Oberheim synth bass. So that sounds like this. Cool. So we have that all as one. And then while I was in Logic, I figured I would play a little live drums. So I did that. That sounds like this. Pretty basic drum sound. I wanted to mess it up a little bit because who doesn't want to mess it up a little bit? So I threw these plugins on it. The RC20 Retro Color, and that sounds like this. So basically what that's doing is making it mono, adding some noise, some vinyl noise here, a little wobble, and distorting it, and kind of bandpass filtering it, so it makes it just kind of sound like it's a drum set like in the corner. It's not like not hi-fi, which is, I kind of really like that juxtaposition of super hi-fi drum machine, lo-fi sounding like trash can drums. Who knows why? I don't know why I have expensive drums, and I don't know why I want to make them sound like shit, but whatever. So we did that, and then layering on top of that, I threw this thing called the FAT effects, FAT with a PH, which is just a Logic stock plugin, which, wow guys, FAT with a PH, all right. And this is just a preset called Crunched that I just literally cycled through presets here till I found something I liked. Maybe I tweaked it, maybe I didn't. I probably didn't even tweak it. So that layered on top with the RC20 as well sounds like this. And if I toggle them on and off, you'll hear the difference. Here you go. Okay, so now the fun part, and the reason I put this in Logic is that Logic has these different Varispeed modes. Speed and pitch is the one that I typically use. You can use speed only. That is going to try and maintain the pitch of the audio while changing the speed. But for this example, we want to change the pitch as well. So I put it in Varispeed, and just to refresh, this is what the original sample sounds like. Cool. So then we come up to Varispeed here, and you can type in a value. And for this example, I wanted to cut it in half. So I'm going to do minus 50%. And that sounds like this. Cool, so you get the idea, tons of vibe. And if we take a listen to the live drums over here, that sounds like this at half speed. Cool, so you get all these like lo-fi artifacts that I love, and it sounds really janky, which I love. I don't know why I love that, but I do. So that plus the track, the live drums plus the track at half speed sounds like this. So with this technique, I was able to kind of get a lot of vibe out of a bass part, a drum machine part, and some live drums. Right away, it's the basis for the whole track, and it's kind of just layering after that and putting vocals on it. So I exported all this stuff as individual files, put it back into Ableton, and then we'll pop over there and I'll show you how I finish the track. All right, guys, so now we're back in Ableton, and I'm imported the half speed track, so the bass and the drums, half speed that we did in Logic. I've imported that, and I've actually made a copy of it. So now we have two versions of this. And then in Ableton, something that I love messing around with is the warp settings. So this one I chose texture and just affected the grain size and the flux, and then I also transposed it up 12 semitones, so up an octave. So that sounds like this. And then the duplicated size, I've switched over to tones, also brought it up 12 semitones, up an octave, and that sounds like this. And then if you put those two together, you get this vibe. Which is kind of the basis for the whole track. So we've got that, and that runs, that's that whole performance. So from there, we added some layers. Here we have the Moog Model D. Which is part of the modular, and so that's being modulated by a bunch of different modules in there, modulated by a bunch of different modules. Nailed it. We have a drum loop that I made out of the live drums. That sounds like this. Just to kind of give it some motion. We have another track that's called Wild Mod Effect. And basically what that is the modular running through a bunch of pedals and a weird guitar effect from the 90s being printed onto cassette and then brought into Ableton, so it sounds all fucked up. That's a theme. Then from there, I added some drums, just some programmed drums using Native Instruments Drum Lab, which I really like. It looks like this and sounds like this. So that's kind of one layer giving some motion there. Okay, if we pop over to the end here, we have the Manus Territas, which is a module made by Noise Engineering. And I used this kind of just to give us some extra flavor at the end here. That sounds like this. So I'm basically just modulating a bunch of different parameters on the front of that with the modular, which is super fun. And then finally, this guitar ran through a bunch of different effects, recorded it to cassette, and then brought it in and kind of comped it and chopped it, and that sounds like this. So it kind of gives you just that gnarly, like, reversey, wonky, quote-unquote solo thing that's happening. So the last thing, I guess, before we talk about the vocals quickly, I want to talk about these drums, these quote-unquote live drums that I played. They're actually samples that I made of me playing just one-shots out at Dave Grohl's Studio 606 out in the Valley. And that room's incredible. Just the sound of the drums in there is incredible. So what I did is chopped up those one shots, put it into a drum rack here so I could play everything. Etc. And then I hooked up a MIDI drum pad so that it was kind of meta. It was like me playing MIDI drums of samples of me playing live drums. But I wanted like a really big room sound, and I really liked the way these sounded, so that was just the easiest way to do it. So that's going through some effects, but that sounds like this. So anyway, so that gives some real punch, and those drums go throughout the track. They come in and out in certain spots, and I think that add a lot of vibe. So let's get into this vocal here. I'm not a huge fan of my voice, so I love effects, and I used a bunch of them that I used on the whole record for this track. So during the verse, we have, again, the RC20, which is kind of giving it grit. The Echo Boy is giving us kind of like a little slap thing. CLA vocals, I know it's cheesy, but it just makes everything sound good. MV2 is just leveling us out a little bit. And then I kind of automated on this saturation thing and a vocal doubler for the chorus. So the chorus sounds like this. And then the verse is a little less intense, so I automated the saturation and the doubling off, and that sounds like this. Swallow the pill, feel regret, ready to let go of your beautiful face. All right, guys, thanks for watching this little behind-the-scenes Nerdfest peek into how this song came together. Let me know if there's anything that you guys are curious about that I didn't go over, or if I just rambled too long, which I'm sure I did, even having edited this down. So anyway, hope you guys are enjoying the record, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.